Our next speaker is Reggie Littlejohn, who's the founder of and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers. She has co-founded, the Sovereignty Coalition, and serves as founder and president of the Anti-Globalist Alliance. And I just would note parenthetically that Reggie has led the effort for years in combating gendercide in China, the killing of baby girls simply because they're baby girls. And when Chen Guangzhen, we were fighting to get him out of prison and then out of China to freedom, she played a major role, and I want to thank her for that.
Thank you, Congressman Smith. And thanks also to Congressman Brad Wenstrup for hosting this crucial and timely press conference to alert the world about the growing concerns over the WHO pandemic treaty. Having demonstrated in the last pandemic its corruption and incompetence, the WHO now seeks the world's approval to greatly expand its power and budget through its proposed pandemic treaty and amendments to the international health regulations. It asks us to trust it, to hold China accountable. Through these expanded powers, why should we trust the organization that kowtowed to China in the last pandemic to turn around and hold China accountable in the next pandemic? The WHO refuses to call the pandemic treaty a treaty. It calls it an agreement, an accord, a framework, anything else, likely because it does not want it to be submitted to the treaty process in the United States and worldwide. Regardless, the pandemic treaty is a treaty. The Oxford Reference Dictionary defines a treaty as an international agreement in writing between two states or a number of states. Clearly, the pandemic treaty is a treaty, and as a treaty, it can only take effect in the United States with the advice and the consent of the Senate. Moreover, the pandemic treaty references the international health regulations 4 times, and it says that everything in the pandemic treaty has to be consistent with the international health regulations. The international health regulation amendments are late. They were supposed to have submitted them on January 27th. They didn't do that. They are continuing to negotiate them probably all the way up till the May meeting of the World Health Assembly, and then spring it on everybody for a vote. That is against Article 55 in the international health regulations. They're violating their own rules, and I believe that the vote on the international health regulations needs to be delayed till the next the World Health Assembly, and that the pandemic treaty needs to wait for the international health regulations to pass because they incorporate them by reference. Otherwise, if we pass the pandemic treaty, it's like a blank check for the international health regulations. We have no idea what they're going to come up with, what is going to be agreed to. Now, with respect to the pandemic treaty itself, there are many, many intractable problems. First of all, surveillance. There's a section that's called Pandemic Prevention and Public Health Surveillance, and it would require nations, including the United States, to implement national pandemic prevention and public health surveillance plans that are consistent with and supportive of the international health regulations. Well, what is that going to look like? What's consistent with the international health regulations or with the WHO's plans? I submit to you that it's going to be done through vaccine passports, although they're not going to call them vaccine passports. They're going to call them digital IDs. And right now, the World Health Organization is in the process of rolling out international interoperable digital IDs. And the pretext for this is, we need to be able to monitor everybody in case of a pandemic. We need to see if people are sick. We need to see if people are vaccinated. But if you look on the World Economic Forum website, there's a chart about what you're going to have a digital ID to do, which is access health care, travel, have a bank account, shop online, pay your taxes, vote. Basically, these digital IDs, once installed, are going to control every aspect of everybody's life. And if you do things that are counter narrative to the WHO, like if you don't get vaccinated, don't get boosted, whatever, they can shut you off from your digital ID and you will be paralyzed. Censorship. The pandemic treaty would require nations to censor their citizens in the form of infodemic management. And an infodemic is defined in part as simply too much information. So this is information that could be true, but the WHO thinks it's too much information, and they would censor it if it leads to mistrust in the health authorities. In other words, if your true information leads you to not want to follow what the WHO is doing or saying, that's misinformation or an infodemic, and they will censor it. Article 18 would obligate nations to combat, a military term, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation. And on the WHO website, you can find many articles on new infodemic management tools, such as social listening. What's social listening? Seems to me like they're going to be watching our social media posts and deciding whether to shut us down or not. Now, with respect to One Health, I agree that in the right hands, One Health is something that's indisputably true. There is a connection between human health, animal health, plant health, and the environment. However, in the wrong hands, in the hands of people who are making a global power grab, what the One Health approach could do is give them a foothold to surveil every aspect of life on Earth. Human health, plant health, animal health, the environment. Total surveillance of everything. Then there's lastly the Conference of the Parties. This would set up an entirely new organization which would have the power to implement the pandemic treaty, but significantly that the Conference of the Party has the power to adopt amendments to the treaty. So what that means is that once people finally agree on a treaty and on the Conference of the Party, which is part of the treaty, the Conference of the Party can, by itself, amend the treaty. And it doesn't say whether that has to go back to the nations for any kind of ratification. So it's essentially a blank check that could establish totalitarian control in the hands of the Conference of the Parties. Together with the international health regulations, the pandemic treaty presents the greatest threat to freedom that the world has ever faced. Public health is being used as a tool for total control. This is not a public health issue, but an instrument to introduce Chinese-style totalitarianism to the United States and worldwide. In my opinion, the world has gotten along just fine without a pandemic treaty. I don't think we really need a pandemic treaty. We can count on people to respond, especially the generosity of the United States, to help where it's needed. But we certainly do not need a pandemic treaty that gives so much power and control to the World Health Organization. Who will keep the WHO accountable? Who can stop them from abusing their power? Once we have ceded our sovereignty, it will be difficult, if not impossible, ever to get it back. Thank you.